I always tell songwriters, like, no one's going to beg you to write another song. It's like a garden. It's your garden. Nobody's going to tend your garden for you. You have to do it. You have to get up in the morning and write that song, or write that sermon in such a way that it has creative parts to it that you didn't do before.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio. Hosts James Curtis talk to artists and industry insiders to discover the connection between music and faith. You can connect with the show at faithstrongtoday.com/betweenthegrooves or via Twitter @betweengrooves.
Hey, welcome to Between the Grooves. It's your look at music ministry and everything in between with today's top Christian artists. Today, a chat with someone who is a worship leader, singer, songwriter, speaker, and author. He's written over 200 songs. On any given Sunday, you're likely to hear one of them in your church. We'll be talking about writing music, helping out the small independent artists, managing your time, social media, and making hymns new again. From Los Angeles, California, Tommy Walker on Between the Grooves.
What time do you wake up?
You don't want to know. I get up at 2:30. Sorry, I get up at 2.
Oh.
Yeah, but I'm a morning person, so I do some of my show prep early in the morning too.
Yeah, but you've passed the line. That means you're a night person.
Well,
so
yeah,
early.
Yeah, I guess technically, I suppose.
Yeah.
The one thing that strikes me about you, Tommy, is you've managed to hang on to your job for well over 30 years.
Yep.
That's quite a feat, if I can say. And quite frankly, I'm sure many people have knocked on your door over the years as well.
Yeah, so where to begin? Like I moved to LA to go to music school from Texas, and I was looking for a church, a smaller church, because quite an introvert, not as much anymore, but I remember my mom telling me, don't wait for the perfect moment in time for God to use you, but give your gifts away in some way, like right now. So I found this little church, and I just walked up to the pastor and I said, you don't know me, but I'm here to serve. So I ended up started playing guitar on the worship team, and then eventually I became the worship leader. But partly what was in my mind was being at one church for a really long time. It's like a marriage, so there's been a lot of forgiveness on both sides, a lot of patience, a lot of just believing that if I could be planted in one place, it would be valuable for me and my kids, and it would be hopefully valuable for the church. So I just kind of made a decision to be a church guy, and it is so rare, but it has been such an amazing blessing. And Christian Assembly was just a place where, well, the other part of the story is I'm a songwriter, so I was putting out my demos back in the day. I put them on cassettes and pass them around. Remember what cassettes are?
I know what cassettes are. I still have some kicking around. Yeah.
Anyways, being rejected here and there. And then I remember I was talking to my pastor about it. He says, well, why don't you write songs for Christian Assembly? And I thought, well, nobody else wants my songs. So that was the late about 1990. Mm-hmm. Speaking of how historic I am, and so I thought I wasn't writing congregational type worship songs, but I thought, let me try to do this for my church. And the moral of the story is, when I started wanting to be a blessing to my church, that's when God really began to bless me. And so then we made like a church worship CD and started making those, and then my songs in that way started getting passed around to record companies and people looking for worship songs, partly because I try to tell worship songwriters this, like, if you write a song for your church, it becomes your church's song instead of just your song. Mm-hmm. And people really own it. Anyways, the Christian Assembly, I want to say has been so good to me through the years, because they allowed me to turn our church into, I call it the great worship laboratory. We could just kind of try anything. Mm-hmm. Plus, we also had a bunch of just world-class session players from the LA area beginning to attend. So then I was like, well, I can write anything crazy and they'll play it great, you know. Yeah. So it was a real setup, a divine setup, where it was such a wonderful, and has been and still is a wonderful fit for me. And so I've stuck around, and so yeah, my kids grew up going to one church, and now my two sons are actually the youth pastors at our church, and I'm still there.
It's great for family stability, because I find a lot of times if you're church hopping for the job, it's really tough on the family. It's tough on the kids. You know, they gotta find new friends. They gotta get used to a new way of doing things. So that's definitely admirable. And I don't know a lot of people that would have that advantage unless they were truly committed to their local church. And the other thing I've got to say is the fact that your pastor suggested you start writing songs for your church. I think a lot of other churches have finally figured that out over the years.
Yeah, it's a passion of mine for Christian songwriters to write for the church, because it was such a blessing for me. As a matter of fact, we can talk about this later, but I started a nonprofit called Tommy Walker Ministries, where we give away all our music and resources through donations and all that. But we had a donor give a large gift towards scholarships, and I just had this idea, especially internationally. There's no setup for publishing for any possible way for somebody in some of these countries to ever receive a penny for writing a worship song, any kind of song. And so we're just sending the money out as we speak, a certificate of congratulations, and people sent in their worship songs and I made sure that I said, don't send me just your songs, you're trying to shop your songs. This is a song that you've done in your church that has really engaged the people in worship. And so from many nations, and I think it turned out to be like around 50 different people were just sending a bit of money and a certificate saying, go for it, keep writing for your church, and just to encourage them to keep going. And so I'm praying it will help spark even more and more of this. We want the songs for the church to come from the church. I think that's the best way to do it.
How many people are sending you stuff? I mean, I'm the music director of the radio station. I get tons and tons of stuff. I probably have about 600 unopened emails of stuff that gets sent to me because I just don't have time to listen to it all.
Yeah, well, it was only about 60, but here's the thing, is I said, I don't want to hear all your songs, you're pitching a song. This has to be a song, and you're going to have your pastor sign and confirm that this is a song that you've sung, that you wrote for your church, and your church has sung it at least 3 times. So imagine how many people that cut out, you know?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to encourage people that are being faithful to their church and writing songs very specifically for their church. And so not only that, we had a 2-month window when people could do it. So
okay.
Yeah.
No, that sounds exciting. That's definitely the way to get new music out there and get people familiar with some of this music from other countries, because you're so used to hearing that North American sound or the Hillsong from Australia or whatever else. It's nice for the little guy to get a chance, you know?
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is I more and more, every church you go to, the worship sounds exactly the same. And I just think it would be more, the bride of Christ would be even more beautiful if it embraced its diversity and there was different sounds in different churches. So I'm also trying to support that, and it's happening, so it's fun.
And with that exposure, you'll get some covers from maybe a well-known singer or an artist, and that gets them more exposure too.
Yeah, and I mean, I put in there, I have a few publishers I have relationship with, and And it's not a huge chance that a song will get published by them, but I am going to send it to them, let them hear it, and so the little guy is also excited to have that possibility.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to say the little guy, that sounds bad, but
I know, it's just
independent.
Yeah, independent, differentiating from the guy that's signed to a label and has got, albums coming out every year or song releases going out to radio or whatever else.
Yeah.
You've written a few songs.
Yeah, I've written a lot of songs, but it doesn't mean they're any good. But I've written a whole bunch of them.
Well, you've got. He Knows My Name. That was huge a number of years ago, but it's still, timeless. I think that's an awesome song. I can remember singing that in church. Morning into Dancing. That you've got a whole bunch of them that really anybody could hear on any given Sunday in church.
Yeah, I am very blessed. I'm very grateful that God allowed me to find a church that allowed me to write for my church.
Yeah. You've also done a lot of traveling. You've been all over the place. You even did some stuff with Promise Keepers, which I guess tied up a lot of weekends because that's typically when all the men get together for a weekend or whatever. Obviously, that's made life busy in the past for you. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about burnout, because I know with the last couple of years, the pandemic that we're in, pastors in general have, first of all, had a totally different job description, and it's meant a lot of, and of course, membership or attendance in church may be down physically, but also online. So that's been a stress factor for them. But it's also been a learning curve for doing things differently, doing worship differently. It's now, online versus necessarily in person. So it's the adapting to new technology. It's been a crazy, crazy busy schedule trying to meet the needs of the church. So what have you done? What have you done over the last X amount of years, but also specifically in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's a great topic. The two biggest things that have helped me is, number one, you have to really contend to believe that God is at work, that God is using you, that when I get up and get ready for church and do my rehearsal and do whatever all it is and to do it, if I'm actually believing that eternity is being transacted through my life, then man, I don't care what the hassle is, or how many people are there or anything. I'm good. But if I'm not sure if anything's going on, I am discouraged and I'm burned out. I'm forgetting, it's 1 Corinthians 15:58. I could be wrong on that, but it says, always work enthusiastically for the Lord, because you know that anything and everything you do for him is never in vain. That's one of my life verses. And so if I can keep believing that, I can keep going. The other thing that helps me hugely is to stay creative. I always tell songwriters, like, no one's going to beg you to write another song. It's like a garden. It's your garden. Nobody's going to tend your garden for you. You have to do it. You have to get up in the morning and write that song, or whatever or write that sermon in such a way that it has creative parts to it that you didn't do before, or whatever. And when you bring your creativity, meaning really fresh, new ideas and freshness to it, you have a bounce in your step. You're excited. You can't wait till Sunday. But sometimes we forget, and we just think it's up to somebody else to do that. But so when for me, songwriting at my church was, honestly, this is the honest truth, a big part of it was survival, because it is those, as you know, those weekends are relentless, man. They come quick.
Yeah.
And you are tired. And so if I was just doing the top 20 CCLI songs over and over again every week, for me, I just couldn't handle it. But if I'm adding one of my own new vamps to it, or a new song, or whatever it would be, even some sort of new media or video to it or whatever, then I'm kind of excited to see how God's going to use it. So those two things have helped me greatly along the way. And yeah, it's over 30 years now I've been at my church. I always say it's kind of like, if I was, because worship leaders, they usually only last 2 or 3 years at a church.
Yeah.
So like if you counted me, worship leader, church years, and dog years, like I've been at my church for like 150 years.
That's one way to look at it. Yeah, what is it? Say 3 years for a worship leader or a worship pastor. What is it? Maybe 5 years for a youth pastor, or is it less than that?
Yeah, I think it's less than that as well.
Yeah. So,
but it's hard. It's. I'm not lessening how hard it is.
Yeah, it's. You definitely have to have a calling for it. With all the stuff going on, like you said, a weekend is a write-off time-wise, and it's exhausting. I can remember in a church I used to attend, I was there for many, many years, we had 3 services, 2 in the morning and 1 at night, and I did the math one day because I was the sound guy, and I did the math. I was in church on that Sunday for a good 8 hours. Like, it was a full-time job in a sense. And it was exhausting because then you wonder after the weekend, I got to go back to work on Monday morning, and I don't feel I've had any rest. I just feel, whipped. So what do you do? How do you manage your time between Sunday service and all the, responsibilities you have in the church, whether it be, the clerical stuff and the admin stuff, and then the wanting to spend time to form the relationships with the worship team and also writing music? Like, how do you do all that?
Yeah, well, there are a couple more things on the subject that reminds me of, and one of them is I treat my Monday Sabbath very seriously. Obviously my whole life, weekends is when I'm working, And so when Monday comes around, I don't do anything. Anything to do with what I do, So that's really helpful. And then the other thing I do, and I try to remind worship leaders about this, is I pace myself throughout the year, or throughout each month. So I might have a kind of complicated weekend where I've got new songs and I've got videos that we've made as part of it, or whatever kind of high production. And then the next week, and we've done this for years at our church, it's like about every 5 weeks, we just call it Acoustic Sunday. Mm-hmm. And it is simple, but it's powerful because it reminds everyone, look, it's not about the show, it's about the presence of God. It's just about coming and seeking Him and connecting with God. So then on that weekend, my prep, I'm like doing it with like one singer and maybe one musician. My prep is almost zero. And it helps me get ready for the next week, which I'm going to ramp up again. And that's another way to last for the long haul. But there's a part of it, like, I don't know how else to say it. It's work, It's like, I think that, I don't know, I think maybe in some ways in this day and age we live, we think work is... It's like, if it's hard, it's wrong or bad. It's like, well, no, work is work and work is hard. So Part of it is just having some, I don't know, just some tenacity to just know it's going to be hard, but I can do it. I can do all things through Christ, and you just keep going.
If you're in a job you love, it's hard, but it can still be fun.
That's right.
And that's kind of the way my philosophy is. And I like what you said about your Monday Sabbath. I've really tried to do that on Sundays now, especially, I got to say, especially with the pandemic. A lot of people haven't been able to physically go into work. A lot of people working from home. For me, I'm still going into work every day, have since the beginning of this whole thing. So I haven't had a quote unquote break in that sense. But what I have done is I've taken advantage of Sundays where my wife and I go to church online, and it's we're still getting up, but we're in the living room by a certain time to watch the online service, and then for the rest of the Sunday, I'm just chilled, I'm just relaxed. I remember yesterday I was lying on my couch just reading a book, and then my mom, who just moved into our city, dropped by for lunch unexpectedly, and that was fine. She stayed, we just kind of chilled, and then as soon as she was gone, I'm back on the couch reading my book again and just did absolutely nothing. And it was amazing because I felt well rested after it. Saturdays for me is errand day. It's getting doing the laundry, doing the cleanup, doing this. I got to go and do this, take care of this. So Saturday, I know it's going to be busy, but I don't mind that if I know that Sunday is going to be resting.
I really think that's great. People really underestimate that God said, you need to work and you need to rest.
Yeah.
And you really need to have a rhythm that is both. And work is a gift. And we could talk about this for hours, that to have purpose in your life, especially eternal purpose, is a gift. And then rest is a gift. And you must have both of them. I mean, think about it. God is telling us, yes, you need to rest. And by the way, you need to rest from your phone, from your screen time, because we don't need to get into that, but just staring at your phone is not rest. So
it's funny, you see, especially in January, you see a lot of people saying, I'm taking a social media break for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I think that's great. For me, I think it would be better if you take a more long-term approach to it. It's not just taking a break for, completely shutting off social media for 2-3 weeks or a month or whatever. Why not make it part of your daily practice where you're going to only spend X amount of hours per week on social media or X amount of minutes per day, and then shut it off so that you can, be present where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And it's just like anything in our life. It's just that this is new in the world. It's like, you shouldn't eat chocolate cake every day, we already know that, but
I didn't know that was a thing. I'm going to have to stop.
Or 3 times a day, every day. There's things that they're not necessarily bad, but they can be bad. You know my point.
Yeah, so, it catches up with you in the end. And I think that's the problem with technology in a sense, because you kind of rely on it, but if it becomes too prevalent in your life, maybe it's consuming too much of your time, then maybe it shouldn't.
Yeah, and something else I think about is, if you think about it, we're all like extreme content consumers. Like, we have this device, so 24 hours a day we're consuming somebody else's opinion or somebody else's video or song or dance or joke or whatever it is, and somebody else's offended rant about politics or whatever all it is. and I just think, and I'm sure this is the songwriter in me, it's like, maybe we should all think about being more on the creating end than the consuming end, or at least even it out. And on that, whatever you're creating, make it something God glorifying and something beautiful and something helpful. And I just think that's such a healthier way to live, because the process of developing and creating and doing it for the glory of God is just such a healthy way to live, as opposed to just watching what everybody else is doing and sitting around.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would say to that in the creation of content is, as you said, to glorify God and for you and God, versus to create content because I got to post something.
Yeah.
Right? Because then it's more of a chore, and it's, I got to do this because it's my image or whatever else,
Well, right, and that leads us into another subject for me is, why are you releasing this content? Usually we've never been in a time where everybody on the planet has the potential to be famous or popular.
Yeah.
And on top of that, everybody can know exactly how famous you are because your views are right in front of everybody. And it can be such a trap. And I feel like I have a lot to say about it because I've, on a very small degree, I get it. But there was a time, like in the early 2000s, where my influence was much bigger than it is today. So you have this taste of, again, I realize it's all relative and it's much smaller compared to other people, but it was much bigger than the average person. So you have this influence, and then all of the social media starts coming out, and you start doing things, and then your influence, as you get older, starts dropping. And it's this great challenge in your life. But wait a minute, am I just doing whatever I'm doing to get views? And then you stop to think, well, this guy over here, he just did a video of his cat and he got 2 million views.
Right.
It can't be that I'm just trying to make views.
Yeah.
You have to talk to yourself, and you have to think, I want to spend my time seeking God and creating and releasing content that's truly for God's glory and not for mine, and do my best work, and then leave it to God as to what He wants to do with it, and to constantly be asking myself that question: whose glory am I fighting for? What team am I on? God's glory team or Tommy's glory team?
Yeah.
And it's quite a interesting subject matter these days because now everybody's fighting for views.
Yeah, I find what drives me nuts is when somebody's posting something online and talking about, I don't know, how amazing, a service it was on Sunday, or maybe it's a political rant or whatever else, but they post a picture of themselves. It's like, so is the purpose of that post to really talk about what you're talking about, or is it because you've got a great selfie that you wanted to share with everybody?
Yeah.
Right?
And but hey, we all have to admit it.
Yeah.
We're all prone. We all want to be liked. We all want to be popular. I mean, if you're a little second grade girl in her school class to President of the United States, everybody wants to be liked and popular. We have to fight it. But as Christians, we've been taught that a healthy life is a life that's fighting for God's glory and not our own. And so we can't pretend like it's not a fight for all of us. But we are acknowledging it, but we're trying to chase after the right thing.
Yeah. Okay, enough of that, because we could go on for hours.
Yeah.
Let's talk new album. You've got a new album dropping. My understanding is it's kind of going down memory lane, but there's a modern twist to it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, part of this, you mentioned Promise Keepers, which I'm sure a lot of people have no idea what that was. It was a men's movement back in the late 90s where it was massive. I mean, at its height, when I was involved with it, we'd have like 5 stadiums in America all going on the same weekend and filled with men, and and it was really cool. It was very multiracial and encouraging men to be integrous and love their wives and follow God and everything. It was really cool, and I got to lead worship in stadiums. It was really amazing. But part of that time is I grew up with the hymns, and I thought, I love hymns, but it seems like hymns don't have choruses, as a songwriter. So I just started adding little choruses to the hymns, and then some of those got recorded. As a matter of fact, the biggest Promise Keeper event was called Stand in the Gap, and it was at the mall in Washington, D.C. There was over 1 million men there. And I remember being up there, and every 100 yards there was another Jumbotron. It was just massive, and they started a chorus to A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, and they started the event with it. It was like such an amazing experience to hear 1 million men sing something you wrote in your little church office the year before. But anyways, I started doing that, and then the other thing that came to me was I grew up hearing the hymns, and for me, and I realized the hymns through the centuries have been the great generational connectors. Like, they've really connected old worshipers with young worshipers, and I think they still have the power to do that. So Generation Hymns 3 is coming out in March, and so there's young and old together on it. But yeah, it's very contemporary versions. But for me, I mean, it's all good however anybody wants to do it. I like to keep the original melodies, but then bring contemporary grooves to it and these added choruses. And yeah, I did it with my daughter Eileen Walker, who is 20 years old, and so we represent the generations and just had a blast doing it. We did it at Bethesda Community Church in Fort Worth with some amazing singers there, Jovan and Gerard Woods and Brent Brunson, and yeah, real excited about it. We have one of the singles is out already, Power in the Blood. A lot of you will know that.
I will say this about hymns, and I led worship in my church many years ago. I don't anymore because I talk for a living now, and I would always lose my voice by Monday morning, so I can't afford to lose my voice if I talk for a living. But the church that I attended, the lead pastor, his mandate for the worship leaders was he wanted at least one hymn in the time of praise and worship. And the reason for that is because he wanted to make sure that everybody, every age, could participate in worship together. And there's always, those old timers that will say, "Oh, I love the hymns. And so I very often would get the older people in the congregation coming up to me after the service saying, "Oh, love that song, so glad you sang it," versus, the new stuff. And I like when there's a new variation of the song done anyways, like a hymn is done in a new contemporary way, because that lets the older generation appreciate it still, but the younger generation is like, "Oh, cool, new song."
Yep, exactly. That's exactly, you just described what we're releasing perfectly. That's what we call it, Generation Hymns. Yep. I mentioned it, but 5.5 years ago, I just decided it was just also part of my life season. I just wanted to give all my music away, including the charts and performance tracks and anything I created. And I thought, let's do instead of charging for anything, so people internationally, anybody anywhere could have anything that I do, and see if we could fund it with donations. And it's happened, and we have people contributing from all over the world, and we've had actually 100, all of the, whatever it is, the 195 countries have all come to our website, and we've given away, actually we counted like 100,000 of our charts and instructional videos and different things to people, and it's just a real joy. At TommyWalkerMinistries.org, I just wanted to be able to mention it. It's been such a blessing to give it all away, and maybe even an example for another creative person out there to consider doing something like that for your own art. So I encourage you to take advantage of anything free we're doing, and of course in March we'll have, when you get the hymns album, we'll have the free charts for it on our site. In fact, the Power in the Blood song and chart is already up there. And if you want the actual choral arrangements and orchestration, you can go to prismmusic.com. So anyways, it's been such a joy to do it, and I really appreciate you having me on and getting to mention that, and it's been a wonderful blessing to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Tommy, for hanging with me.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Tommy Walker on Between the Grooves. Make sure you check out his website, TommyWalkerMinistries.org. You can find the links to his music, events, and social media. It's time now for some artist advice. Here's Logan Kane from the family group Kane.
So my standing advice is, I believe part of what took us so long is we didn't fall in love with writing songs really until this new process started. So we wrote almost 100 songs in 2019 as a group. And so my advice to anybody that's pursuing music as a new artist is write all the time. Write every bad thing you can think of, because you got to write all your bad songs to start writing your good songs. And the best way to build relationships within your musical community is to write together. So I just encourage any new artist to just dive in and start writing, and don't feel like you have to write I Can Only Imagine every time. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just get in there and do the work and start writing.
Don't stop writing. Some great advice from Logan. And thank you to Tommy Walker for being our guest this week on Between the Grooves. That is it for this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast for new episodes. And don't forget to leave us a rating and a review. That just helps us reach more people. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Between Grooves. We'll see you next time.